and welcome to the Bookyard. I'm Sam.
And I'm Kai.
Okay, before we get started, how was your week?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I don't know if you have noticed. I'm sure you have. I was in a deep, dark seasonal depression.
Absolutely.
So if it sounded like Sam was holding me at gunpoint doing these, she wasn't. But I was severely depressed. And the sun is out, and so I'm finally a person again. So this week was fire because I have a personality again.
You were so excited this week. You saw the sun.
It was incredible. So I feel like $1,000,000. How was your week?
My week was crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Since the last time we recorded, I graduated from my MBA program.
Hell yeah.
And I just got a new job, so we're not going to be coworkers anymore.
You know it's too touchy, but hell yeah.
I know. I'm so sorry.
It okay. I'm just a little sad, you know?
Yeah. We will still be doing this podcast.
Yes, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It'll be amazing.
Yay.
And we still get to do this podcast, so it'll be so fun. Because when we do get together, we won't have seen each other every single day.
I know. Except that's so it was just so fun to be paid to hang out with your best friend, you know?
I know.
And Sam is so introvert, so like she had to hang out with me for minimum 20 hours a week.
That's true.
It was incredible. It was my ideal situation.
I loved it. I mean, honestly, we could probably get a sponsor because I did those fake ads the last time I was left alone to my own devices.
Yeah, no, I couldn't believe that. I was like, girl, because I didn't listen to it until you released the episode. And I was like, oh my gosh, Sam.
I was like, because Kai's not here, I'm just going to do it. So if anyone actually decides they want to pay me for that, then we could be paid to hang out together.
Yay! Right now, I'm just paid in joy and love.
Aw, that's so cute.
What can I say?
That was the worst way I've ever said cute.
Cute.
That's so cute. Okay. Okay, so this week we are going to talk about Intermezzo.
Yes.
Yay. Intermezzo is a September 2024 release, so it's pretty recent.
Mm-hmm.
It is a literary or contemporary fiction work, and it was written by Sally Rooney.
Ooh, Sally Rooney did amazing things with this book.
Genuinely, as soon as it was released, it kind of took over, and for good reason.
Absolutely. Our favorite bookstore that we talk about in last week's episode is Poppy, and they did a whole book of the month for it.
Yeah, and I still haven't gotten a copy, but I need to. I listened to this one.
I also listened to this one.
And the accents were so fun.
So fun. What accents are they? Oh, okay, wait. They're in Dublin.
Yeah, they're Irish.
Got the luck of the Irish.
It was a good book. I loved it.
It was great. So to kind of get in, I'm going to be Blurb Kai, and I'm going to read the little blurb from Goodreads. And it says, aside from the fact that they are brothers, Peter and Ivan Kubek seem to have very little in common. Peter is a Dublin lawyer in his 30s, successful, competent, and apparently unassailable. But in the wake of their father's death, he's medicating himself to sleep and struggling to manage his relationships with two very different women. His enduring first love, Sylvia, and Naomi, a college student from whom life is one long joke. Ivan is a 22-year-old competitive chess player. He has always seen himself as socially awkward, a loner, the antithesis of his glib older brother. Now, in the early weeks of his bereavement, Ivan meets Margaret, an older woman emerging from her own turbulent past, and their lives become rapidly and intensely intertwined. For two grieving brothers and the people they love, this new interlude, a period of desire, despair, and possibility. A chance to find how much one life might hold inside itself without breaking.
How did you like that blurb?
I'm going to be so real. I know you guys see the cut versions of these. I had to say that blurb 5 trillion times because I'm not very good with big words.
Sally Rooney has like a way with big words. It's
she
beautiful.
Totally does. And it's gorgeous if you are a competent speaker.
Just a competent read aloud.
Yeah, I'm so good at reading in my head, mainly because when there's big words, I just go,
I think that is a thing that readers have happened to them a lot because they're familiar with like the meanings of words, but a lot of times they can't say them out loud because they've only ever read them in their head.
So that was a little rough, but I thought that the blurb covered pretty well and gave us a good base for what this book is about.
Yeah, because basically it really is about these two brothers, Peter and Ivan. So I'll just go over the characters really quick. Peter is a lawyer. Just fun background info. When we were in the middle of reading this book, I was looking up all of these things online because, again, I'm not opposed to spoilers at all. But someone kept telling me that not someone, the internet. There was one specific article that was like, Peter is a musician. But I know for a fact I was reading this book and I kept hearing like, Peter's a lawyer. Peter's doing this at his law office.
I know.
He is a lawyer.
Well, and Sam even asked me, she's like, I read this thing, it said he's a musician. That isn't right. And I was like,
I know. I had to clarify because there were so many comments that were like, yeah, this book is so good. But they never clarified like, Peter is clearly not a musician.
So I don't know where the musician thing came from, but he definitely does not do that.
No, he's a lawyer.
Yeah. Anyway.
Ivan is a chess player. He also does freelance work because he has like a different degree and everything. But his whole like main thing is that he is a chess player.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia is Peter's ex-girlfriend. Naomi is Peter's current thing.
Boo thing.
Not like girlfriend situation, but it's definitely like a situationship full of like shame on Peter's end. But we'll talk about that more.
Mm-hmm.
Margaret is the most adorable woman I've ever seen, even though we haven't seen her physically.
Never seen her in real life, but she's cute.
But she's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
She ends up around Ivan, so we're going to talk more about that. Anna is Margaret's friend. She's not a huge character, but she does give some good background info here.
Yep.
Christine is Peter and Ivan's mom. She a bitch. We don't love her.
Yeah.
Margaret's mom, more a bitch.
Yeah, poor moms. They just got a terrible rep, this book.
No, this book has some really complicated relationships with moms, and we have like a whole section on it.
Mm-hmm.
Peter and Ivan's dad is dead.
Gosh dang it.
I don't know why everyone got like a normal description, like Peter's current thing, and then I wrote Peter and Ivan's dad dead.
No, but not just dead in all caps.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
I don't know where that was either, but
Alexei is their dog.
yay.
He's Ivan's dog, really.
Yeah, but that's kind of the characters.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about Peter and Ivan because they are the two main characters and it does end up really from their perspective. And then we also get some Margaret perspective, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
But they are the principal two main characters.
Yeah.
Kai and I have had quite a few conversations about Peter specifically.
Yeah.
Peter is the older brother. I know you had mentioned that you felt like he was the villain in Ivan's story and that you didn't go into the book with the intention of understanding him.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, this book was just absolutely my cup of tea. Sam knows this. I go crazy for a book about like hard family dynamics. Like that is my jam. So when I understood that this is what that book was, I was like, I'm in. Mm-hmm. But going into that, I think maybe even just like an hour into the audio, I got the impression that Ivan was the good guy and Peter was the bad. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm into it. And like, I didn't give Peter any room to grow in my head. And he definitely did grow as a character, but I went into it being like, no, he's the villain. He's stupid and I hate him. And I think it definitely affected the way that me and Sam saw the ending of the book. Because when we talked about it, she was like, yeah, like Peter this. And I was like, Peter's stupid. And Sam was like, what? So it definitely gave a different perspective, I think.
I like that. I mean, I think that it's pretty easy to go into a book and be looking for, because this book didn't really have like a real villain.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've kind of been in this phase where we're like reading a lot of romantasy and a lot of sci-fi and you get like a very distinct villain.
Yeah.
And then you go into one of Sally Rooney's books and they're all just like people.
Mm-hmm.
And people sometimes suck.
Absolutely. Everybody was kind of like their own villain and everybody thought that like one another was a villain at one point.
For sure. So I love that you kind of went into it and were like, you identified a villain and you were just like, yep, that's how it is. Whereas I kind of went in and I was just like, oh my gosh, these people are going through some shit.
Yeah. And I think like you were kind of saying, it comes from a place of, I read a lot of romantasy. The like contemporary kind of literature is still pretty new to me, even though I love it and it's some of my favorite books. That kind of dynamic and not having like this set, this is the villain, this is the hero, this is the system, is kind of new to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's honestly, it reminds me a little bit of A Little Life in that
Yes.
you do have real villains, but a lot of the conflict you get in the actual book is just people who are hurt and they're trying to figure things out.
Yeah, which is so interesting. But yeah, I don't know, from your perspective, give me some like Peter, Ivan.
Yeah. So from my perspective, Peter and Ivan are both really distinct individuals. I am the oldest sibling in my family. technically, because I mean, my parents had myself and then my younger brother,
Mm-hmm.
and then they both got remarried and everything, and I have like 11 step siblings. But for a long time, I was the oldest sibling,
Mm-hmm.
and there were definitely some aspects of both of the brothers that I understood.
Yeah.
For example, like at the beginning of the book, Peter talks about Ivan with like palpable resentment. He talks about how Ivan has this weird sense of like entitlement, and Peter talks all about who he thinks that Ivan is because of all these experiences that they had when they were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ivan was kind of like an incel and kind of antisocial. He had some really harmful views about women, and Peter seemed a little hesitant to open up to him specifically because of those experiences that they had lived in the past, even though it didn't reflect Ivan's like reality, especially after Peter tried to open up to Ivan at one point about Sylvia's accident, and he didn't really react at all. And I think he kind of felt a little bit isolated and like he needed to be the emotional leader of the family, even if that wasn't really the case. So I can absolutely relate to like that part of Peter's journey. It doesn't make it better because Peter at times really does suck. Like he is not an easy character to like relate to. And he's not one that I genuinely like as a person.
No.
You know? Like I have a younger brother, and there have been many times in my life when my opinions about his personality have closed me off to a relationship with him. And that may or may not reflect who he is as a person. Sometimes, sure, it does. But that's not always the case with everybody. That dynamic I really thought was super real and relatable for both of them because they both, having grown up together, kind of had these ideas about who the other one was that they had both grown since then, and they kind of had like a hard time bridging that gap that had existed.
Yeah, well, and me and Sam talk about this a lot, about if we would be friends with somebody, whether it's like a movie character or a book character or an author, and I think we both kind of were like, we would not be friends with Peter if we were in his reality. Like, not for me.
No, he definitely is not an easy personality. I think in this book specifically, it's easy to say like, yeah, for sure, I'd be friends with Ivan, right? But I don't know that like he would be up for that because he is kind of like introverted.
Yes.
And, I'm introverted, or, so like it's hard for us sometimes to be like, yeah, this person would definitely be our friend. But like we loved Ivan in this book.
I'm sorry, I'm having like a weird premonition moment. I've been listening to you talk, and I read this book like months ago. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of coming back up to my brain. And I'm honestly wondering if part of the reason I really didn't love Peter is because I feel like Peter was a reflection of myself.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
Like, I feel like his experience and like the things that he went through, and sometimes his mindset, especially when he was really depressed, and like his life and like what it was worth and his decision making and all of that kind of thing. I think that I didn't like him because I saw a fraction of myself in it, like not the best parts of me. And I was kind of like, ooh, I don't like that.
No, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that because there were several times while I was listening to it and I thought, oh my gosh, I feel the same. And then it was like an ugly emotion because it was something that I would never want someone to know about me. Like,
absolutely.
Like, Peter would say something about like his brother that was just like absolutely rough. And I was like, I've felt that before.
Yeah.
And then it was just like this place definitely that came from like shame. But that's part of the reason I was so surprised that you didn't like Peter more. And I don't think necessarily like is the word, but like relate to him more because he definitely talks a lot in this book about like being parentified and feeling like this emotional charge.
Yeah. And that's absolutely my life. That has been my life forever.
I mean, we both absolutely have had experiences like that. And it doesn't bring out the best in you sometimes.
Yeah. No, it really doesn't. It ruins a lot of relationships, especially with siblings later on.
Yeah.
So the more we're talking about this, the more I was like, you know what? I think I hated Peter as a character, but I think it's because I resonated so much with him and I relate so much with him that it made me uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Which I think is extremely talented. Like
Sally,
you
did some good work.
Oh my gosh. The fact that we can have such strong emotions about Peter because he reflects some of the craziest parts of ourselves, that's good literature.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Okay, so we talked a lot about Peter and his relationship with Ivan, but this book doesn't only focus on their relationship, it focuses on each brother's relationships with the women that they're dating and not dating, just their relationships in general. And we are going to kind of shift into Ivan and Margaret's relationship.
Yay.
Love them. They're so cute. So with each relationship that is going on, there's obviously a very big hurdle that they're trying to get through. And with Ivan and Margaret, their biggest one, they have a couple, but their biggest one I would say is the age difference. Ivan turns 22 while they're together, but he was 21 when they met, and Margaret is 36. Yeah. And so Ivan's more of the like, I don't really care. Like, I think at first he was a little bit more like, oh, you know, but Margaret was definitely way more insecure about it. And that was a huge thing that they were trying to figure out and get through, because she just had this idea of like what society would think about them. And she was also a newly divorcee from an alcoholic, and her family was just really not supportive of her leaving her alcoholic husband. So she was also just definitely of, what does society think of me and what should I do?
Absolutely. There was like a lot of shame. I think that's one of the main themes of the book, because both Peter and Margaret feel so much shame, and they really are really great reflections of one another.
Absolutely.
And comparisons. But we can talk a little bit more about Margaret and Peter a little bit later. But Ivan and Margaret, for me, were genuinely beautiful. I think it was, both of our favorite parts of the book.
For sure.
There is this part of the book that I keep thinking about, where Margaret is constantly thinking about what people are going to think about her. Just kind of relating back to what you said, she thinks so much about society's expectations. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit. But when we go over the similarities between Margaret and Peter, we talk a lot about the ways they react.
Yeah.
But the part that I keep thinking about is when Margaret is reflecting on her marriage. She talks about how for so long people recognized that she was married to this man who was sick. He was an alcoholic and he couldn't take care of himself, let alone her. And she got so used to the knowledge while she was taking care of him that everything that she was doing in life was noble and good, and that it was hard for her after she decided to end her marriage to overcome the sense that she wasn't adhering to what was good or correct. And that really related to how she felt about herself dating Ivan. She talked about how it kind of became almost like an addiction for her, that people looked at her and were like, oh, she's noble, she's good. And it really affected her sense of self when, for the first time in her life, she had to analyze her actions with, how is this going to affect me, instead of what are people going to think about it?
Yeah, well, and I think that, because we were talking about a little bit about parallels, but I think that it's hard for Margaret because she has her friend Anna, who is married and has a kid and is very happy. And a lot of times she'll sit down with Anna, and there was just the impression that Margaret was like, oh, this isn't what I have. And it was very like, I felt like for her, it felt like what she could have had. So she was just so like self-conscious of what her relationships looked like, especially with Ivan, because it was so secret. Like, he would sneak away to her house on the weekends, and they like wouldn't tell anybody that they were hanging out and seeing each other. And that went on for a really long time.
Yeah, and I think Margaret reacted to that in a way that any of us could relate to, right? Especially I think as women, because I think a lot of times we worry about what other people are thinking about us, especially our close friends and our family and everything, like the people around us, right?
Absolutely. Because you don't want to let them down. I think I relate to that so much, because I'm currently like dating people and trying to figure things out, and I know that I'm the one who's going to end up marrying whoever I like marry, but I'm always super like, oh, Sam, like, what do you think? And I'm always nervous to find out what Sam thinks, because I really value her as a friend and somebody in my life. So it's kind of like you want that person to validate what you're feeling and be okay with who you're dating, you know?
Well, and react without judgment, I think. I think that was such a hard part of Margaret's story, is that she knew her mother was going to act in such a reactive and judgmental way. And she worried so much about Anna too, even though Anna and her were so close as friends. She was worried a lot of throughout the book that if she told Anna, that she'd look at her like she was a monster.
Yes. Which was so hard, because Ivan and Margaret's relationship was so beautiful. They really helped each other grow so much, because kind of looking a little bit deeper into Ivan, he was somebody who was very introverted and very intelligent. And they don't ever talk about him like having any sort of disability or anything, but everybody treats him like that. They all treat him like he's dumb and he doesn't know what he's talking about and doesn't have any life experience. And that kind of comes from Peter. And we know that Ivan wasn't perfect. He had very narrow-minded views. And sometimes that does just come with age and kind of your environment. But we know that he wasn't perfect. But everybody around him really didn't believe that he could handle himself. And I feel like Margaret was the first person who kind of let him be a person and do his own thing and not be like, he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. No, I think she inspired so much growth in him. Like, I remember at the very beginning, they're talking about their dad's funeral, and both Peter and Christine, their mom, they're talking shit about Ivan because he wears this like wrinkled and too big suit to the funeral. And they're constantly analyzing his actions in ways that make him feel resentful towards them, because they're constantly like, why wouldn't you do this way? Or why wouldn't you do that this way? Which is so real in any family situation. I mean, I feel like I have a pretty healthy family situation at this point. But I mean, obviously there are points in the past and then in other families that I've seen where it's so classic, right? I mean, you get into your head what's correct, and then you judge your family members because they haven't adhered to it.
Right. Well, and they don't let Ivan speak at their father's funeral. And he didn't realize that that was something that wasn't cool and like wasn't. And it was like later on that he kind of talked to Margaret and was like, was that like, why didn't they let me do that? Like, why did Peter do that?
Yeah. And he carries it with him because him and his father were very close, and Peter and their dad
really
weren't close. And Peter was the one who spoke. And he did it out of this like older brother duty sense, which, you know, I can relate to. Like, there are a lot of duties. I feel like I would probably do the same. I'd be like, okay, great. Yeah, I'm the oldest. I've got to say something. Sure. So I don't know that Peter did it intentionally, but I think Margaret was the first person that Ivan explains. Obviously, we haven't seen every relationship he's ever like had with friends or whatever, but the first person in this book who listened to his ideas as if he were her equal.
Yes.
Which I think that's such a major concern about age gap relationships, right? Is that there's going to be a big power dynamic.
Yeah.
But the way that Margaret went about it and the way that Ivan went about it really avoided a power dynamic, because they treated each other as equals and they made sure to understand each other's perspectives.
Yes. So their relationship, absolutely gorgeous.
Loved it. Everything about it.
But continuing with the relationships, let's kind of dive into the mothers of this book and how honestly terrible they were.
They really were awful. Both Peter and Ivan have a weird relationship with their mom. Christine is her name. Peter is obviously much closer to their mom, but Margaret also has a pretty awful relationship with her mom, and her mom's terrible, like genuinely terrible. Yeah. And Anna also has a poor relationship with her mom.
Yes.
So I mean, it's just moms in this book are hard.
Yeah.
As far as Peter and Ivan, both of them call their mom by their first name.
Like her first name, yeah.
Yeah, like they're all very emotionally distant from her. And they talk a little bit about the dynamic in their family, in that once their parents got divorced, her mom got remarried and had two stepsons. Got divorced and everything. She kind of migrated to this new family in a very obvious way and didn't really find ways to integrate them at all. So there's a lot of resentment because Ivan especially wasn't treated very well by this new family, and he kind of felt like isolated. And Peter at this age was already getting ready to leave the house. So he was ready to go to like college.
Yeah.
And so he was older and able to like deal with it a little bit more, but then he left, and it kind of left Ivan in this situation where he was socially isolated from his family members and from the people who are around him, and he really took solace in his dad, which is why this hits him so hard, because this whole book is about the aftermath of their father's death.
Right.
But he didn't really have that same like solace in his mother, mostly because I think that he felt like she had moved on from him as a family. I don't know if you got any insight about that, or any of like Peter and Christine's relationship. They definitely are closer.
Yeah, and it definitely is very prevalent that Christine prefers Peter, and it's just kind of uncomfortable because like I said, it's so obvious. Like, it's not like like I think she might like it. No, like it's pretty blatantly obvious that she prefers him, and it just makes it very uncomfortable. But it seems that she also has a very close relationship with her stepsons. So it just is really devastating. I mean, I don't really have any like crazy insight to that. It just was kind of like it stink. I feel really bad for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Margaret also has this awful relationship with her mom, and Anna and Margaret kind of talk about their mothers together. And I think that's such a fun little aspect of female friendship, that they kind of have these relationships that echo each other.
With Margaret's mom, she was very judgmental when Margaret was going through her divorce. First of all, like, she was very like, why are you leaving him? Even though
like supportive of her alcoholic husband.
Yes, he was terrible. Was he abusive? I don't remember.
No, but she does say like a few instances where like the bar would call her because he literally couldn't walk, and so she would have to pick him up. So it wasn't like he was like physically abusive, not that I remember, but he definitely was not, like, she was a caretaker basically.
Yeah, so I mean, her quality of life was terrible. She was having to provide, having to care for her husband, and her mom was kind of under the impression of, yeah, that's what you do. That's your job. You can't give up. It's not about you. It's about him. So she was so terrible when she was going through that divorce, and had a lot of resentment even after it was done. And I think that if I'm remembering right, her mom kept contact with her ex-husband.
Yeah.
And like would check up on him and things. And so obviously with that in mind, she was not very kind when she found out about Ivan either. She kind of tells Margaret that she's a bad person that when she finds out about it, and that she encourages her to forgive her ex-husband and get back with him. And that was a very like big turning point for Margaret, because she was kind of like, no.
Yeah, I think even in that part, her mom was like, well, I've never liked you that much, but I thought at least you were a good person.
Yeah,
which was devastating. Okay, and then about Anna's mom. We don't see a ton of Anna in this book, but her parts were always very like poignant about her relationships.
Yeah.
So I did separate this quote here so that we could go over it.
Okay.
It said, Anna's mother, Nuala, exerts influence over her husband and children primarily through a tendency to become irrationally anxious and upset. Most of the family life has, therefore, always been arranged around their collective efforts to prevent Nuala from becoming upset, which involves concealing from her, by almost any means necessary, the existence of any problems, or potential conflicts within the family circle. Nuala lives, to some degree, in a fictitious world acted out for her by a special dramatic troupe consisting of her own children and husband, a world in which none of her loved ones have ever been unhappy, sick, depressed, disappointed, hurt, anxious, or frightened. So she's this woman who has absolutely no ability to face the reality of life.
Yeah.
Which makes things so hard for Anna, because she can't express any real emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine if our friendship only consisted of good news and like only ever smiling? I feel like it limits your relationship so much. It's not.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's a very shallow relationship. I think we have that with a lot of Rachel's at work.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, I'm great. Where like, I'm having the shittiest day of my life, but I'm not going to tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, we're at work a lot of times, and people who we know will walk by and say, how are ya? And you could be literally crying and you'd still be like, living the dream.
One time I was crying at work, and Rachel from work came up and told me that I had a really bad sunburn because my face gets really red when I cry. Do you remember that
happened? But you were like literally had tears coming out of your eyes, and then she walked in and you were like, you wiped your tears, and she was like, oh my gosh, Kai, you're so sunburned.
She was like, wow, did you get some color? And I was like, ha,
vacation, living the dream.
I can't even remember why I was crying. I'm a big crier at work, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's been fun,
His character. So yeah, it just really isn't ideal, and that was just a little glimpse into some mom relationships. Dads, unfortunately, didn't really get to represent themselves because they were all dead. But, I mean, maybe that would be better.
Yeah. I mean, also complicated relationships, I guess, because of all the stuff they say, but it's fine.
It's good. We didn't need more bad dad rep,
Yeah, dads did not get the spotlight in this book, and that's okay, even though it really is about the death of a dad.
Very confusing, but yeah. Anyway, moving forward, we kind of touched on it earlier, but let's talk a little bit more about Margaret and Peter being similar in a lot of ways.
I love it. So when we were researching for this episode, again, we're little research queens.
Mainly Sam.
We came across an interesting thought it was on the Chicago Review of Books. So the author wrote, Margaret's story parallels Peter's too. She lost her father, is estranged from her mother and siblings, is tethered to a previous relationship, albeit not with the same fondness as Peter and Sylvia, and falls in love with a much younger partner, despite fear of retribution from her community. She must internally overcome her inhibitions to fall in love. The more I thought about this comment, the more I was like, you know what? Yeah, this was like two very important characters who represented different sides of the same situation for me.
Yeah, two sides of a coin.
Yeah, and I think Margaret for me was so amazing because she reflected the parts of myself that I love, right?
Absolutely.
Peter was such a shameful character because he reflected all of the parts of myself that I'm ashamed of.
For sure.
I just think it's so crazy because although they go through almost not exactly the same situation, but they go through very similar situations, the way that they go through it is so incredibly different.
Absolutely. Like it was the same situation, different font. Like they handled it so differently and they were given the same like hand of cards and played it absolutely differently.
Yeah. Let's jump in a little bit to Peter.
Yeah.
Let me just go into some background because we didn't really introduce you. We told you there was like an ex-girlfriend situation and then like a situationship, but let me just give you some context here for how we're dealing with things. Peter was in this relationship previously with Sylvia, and she was like his first love.
And they were together years.
Yeah, years. They were going to get married. They were just going to have their whole lives. So Sylvia gets into this accident. What we can assume is a car accident. It's not like described in detail.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a little bit confusing because we don't get a lot of context for this until a little bit later in the book, and we don't ever get the full context.
Yeah, no, even with the context they give us, me and Sam have sat there and been like, what? It still doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, so Sylvia gets into this accident and is left with chronic pain. So sometimes she has these episodes where she's in debilitating pain, where she's like on the floor and she just like cannot function because of this accident, right? And she's gone through all of these treatments and it's just really not working for her. So she breaks up with Peter. Like she calls everything off with Peter because she specifically is in a lot of pain and is unable to have sex.
But it just was kind of confusing to me, that part, because I mean, I've never had chronic pain, and that's part of the issue, is I don't understand it. And so it's definitely a ignorance issue of mine. It's not like it didn't make sense. It's more of like I probably should have looked into it more to understand it better. But like, I just didn't get it. Like she...
Right. I mean, she pushes him away.
Right. Because she has painful sex, but like...
Well, and I think it's more than that too, because I think she does go into a little bit more detail a little later, and she talks about how she doesn't want him to be a caretaker and she doesn't want him to lose this part of himself because she knows, and you know what, good on her for respecting that. If it is painful for you to have sex, by all means don't have sex. You don't know that.
Absolutely. Yes.
However, she breaks up with him out of this sense of almost like guilt.
Yeah, and it's more like she's making a decision for Peter, being like, you don't deserve this, which is one of my biggest pet peeves, because you really can't decide for other people what they deserve and their decisions. And it was, because if she was like, you know what, I can't do this, fine, absolutely, you make your decision. But it was more like, you can't do this, I don't want you to do this. And it really left no room for him to be like, well, I want to. It was just like, no.
And that's their main conflict, is that eventually they finally get to the point, and they finally get to the actual conflict that they're having, because they are still close and he's absolutely still in love with her. And they finally get down to this, and he's like, you didn't ever ask me. You didn't even ever like see my opinion about it. Mm-hmm. But they still like very clearly love each other, which has left Peter with this inability to give himself emotionally to anyone else. Right. So he's also in this other situationship with Naomi.
Yes.
Who is a lot younger than him. She's a year older than Ivan,
I think, yeah. I think she's 22, 23, maybe.
Yeah. So they are in these very similar situations. He is with Naomi, who is this girl who like had an OnlyFans, and she lives in this like illegal dwelling with a bunch of roommates and everything. And just, he provides pretty much for her financially when she's not like working and doing like OnlyFans and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he is really ashamed of her. Like he
Yes.
loves what she can like give him sexually, and they love to like talk and chat, and she's so fun, and he really enjoys time with her, and she really gives him different aspects than Sylvia did.
Right.
But this whole time he's still in love with Sylvia, so you can see that he's not emotionally available for her at all. But there's so much shame surrounding like his own actions that
Right.
he is having such a hard time dealing with it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even end up dealing with his emotions. The women end up having to do it for him.
Yeah, I keep coming to mind this scene where Peter is finally like, oh shit, like, what do I do? Because Naomi's kind of like, I can't keep doing this. And Sylvia's like, I don't want you to be with me because you can't, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're just both like in their different places. And he just kind of loses it. He goes out with his friends and is just, because he's drinking himself to death and just very suicidal and just like, I can't do this.
He goes out with the intention to commit suicide, I think.
Yeah, he's like purposely walking out on streets and just not taking care of himself. And he sits down with a friend and is talking about, he finally opens up about his relationship with Sylvia and Naomi. And it's just like, I don't know what to do because it's so like looked down upon, like what I'm doing. And like, he just shows how much shame he has to this guy. And this guy is just like, oh, damn, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then he goes and stays with his mom for a little bit. Which is also so odd because of their like relationship, and you see the positive parts of it, which is also interesting.
Yeah. So, but like you said, it eventually has to come down to Naomi and Sylvia having to do it for him. Like they come together because obviously he's not doing well. He goes and stays with his mom. He goes back to his place after kind of recovering. I can't remember.
Yeah,
Somehow,
I don't know where he goes, but they found him.
Yeah, they like find, somehow they all end up together, and he wakes up and Naomi and Sylvia are just like chatting away, hanging out, and he just like, oh my gosh, like this is weird, like
Worlds
everything's
colliding.
Yeah, everything coming together, and like they think it's hilarious, like they don't care.
Yeah, and they kind of just think it's funny and they're friends. That's super fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, we get this complex situation with Peter's relationships, and they come to this conclusion where the ending really comes into play, right? Where they kind of sit down, and obviously Sylvia still can't give Peter like the sexual aspect of their relationship, but they all kind of come to this agreement where they're going to be in the situation where emotionally Sylvia and Peter are able to be together, but he can still have a relationship with Naomi. And they don't open up to the fact that like, I don't know, like Naomi and Sylvia aren't necessarily going to like also be in a relationship, but it is going to be like a like situation that they've all agreed to.
Yeah.
Which, you know, obviously isn't my ideal situation. Again, I've said this weirdly in other episodes. Pretty monogamous person.
Yeah, I'm a pretty selfish gal myself.
Yeah, I would have a really hard time with that. But it does seem to work for them. I mean, they all kind of have to let go of really big parts of shame that they have.
And like social ideas of what relationships should look like.
And I think Naomi is the only one who really didn't ever struggle with it, because I think she was already on the fringe of what society thinks is correct. And I think she really is the only one that wasn't like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think about me? Naomi was like, I don't care. This works for me.
Yeah. So the reason that the ending kind of bothered me, I wasn't bothered by a poly relationship or anything like that. I just feel like it was so like abrupt. It was just like, yeah, we're doing this. And I didn't feel like I got the closure of like, what is that really going to look like? And I feel like it kind of leaves it and like it's supposed to be like that and whatever. But it was like, but what about when Naomi is ready to have more of an emotional relationship? Because I feel like she kind of does get to that point where she's like, I do like you. Like, I think he's like, I love you. And she's like, I love you too. But like, how do you build a relationship off of only intimacy and not continue to grow your emotional relationship while having only one other person who fulfills that emotional relationship?
Yeah, and I did like that you didn't like the ending for that reason, because I think that's why I did like the ending. I know that's so dumb. Like I
don't think it's dumb.
it's so fun that we have like these differences at some points, because most of the time we have such like similar opinions, but
Absolutely.
This podcast definitely brings out our like contrasting sides, and I really love it. Like I definitely thought in my brain that the ending kind of underscored like Sally Rooney's like point almost, where like it was all just really messy.
Absolutely.
Like, every single aspect of the relationships and the like humanity in this book was just so messy, because that's like the reality of our lives, right?
Right.
A lot of times I feel like I enter into a situation and I know that there are consequences that are going to come later, But that's what happens. Like, this is what I need right now. And that's going to be the way that it's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
like,
sorry.
Em and I will make a decision and be like, well.
No, the reason I'm laughing is because I even sent Sam a reel of this the other day. And it's this girl. And she's like, so what do you think I should do about this really bad decision I'm making? And the friend's like, well, that's a really bad decision. And the girl's like, well, I know that, but give me different advice. And that is just so me. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm making this really poor decision.
You definitely do that. It's just so like person.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's peak person. And I loved it for that reason because I was like, you know what? On brand for a person in general.
Well, and totally just me. And I think maybe that's why I didn't like it because I carry such shame with the bad decisions I make that I'm making them like fully aware.
Yeah.
The weird part is I always get like nervous to tell Sam. I don't know what that's
about. Making a bad decision, you always are like, you're almost get like kind of secretive and I'm like, dude, I already know you're going to do this. And you'll be like,
I know.
But I don't want your opinion. And I'll be like, okay.
Because I know that if this is just weird now, I'm just getting into it. But like if me and Sam were one brain,
ooh,
Sam is the logical part of my brain. Like, I feel like I'm, for the most part, a pretty logical person. But sometimes I like to make just terrible, shitty decisions. And that's just kind of how it is. But I don't want to tell Sam because she's the logical part of me. And I know that I'll talk myself out of it because I know that Sam knows that it's wrong. But Sam isn't judgmental. That's the craziest part. I've never once in my life been like, Sam judges me.
That is something that people in my life definitely like think about me. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't tell Sam. She's going to think I'm so stupid. And I'll be like, I don't think I've ever told you you're stupid.
She's so not judgmental. It's so weird.
It's fine.
Anyway.
But there definitely are those two like sides of us. And I think that was the fun part of the ending because I am not a person who would go into the relationship or like make the same decisions as Peter. But it made me laugh so hard that I was like, it's just so human to go in and be like, you know what? I know that there could be these consequences later, but I am not going to think about it right now.
Yeah, and I just didn't like that. But I think we kind of covered that I didn't really like Peter's whole story because I feel like it was a reflection of myself. So
how amazing. It's
pretty beautiful.
Book?
Yeah. Oh, it was incredible.
Go read this book. If you haven't read it, please go read it. I would recommend it. And I think about it a lot. I think about the characters a lot. I think a lot about Ivan and Margaret.
Yeah.
I just want the best for them. And we need to go read more of Sally Rooney's book.
Yes.
I haven't read more of hers, but I genuinely am like, I would read anything that you write.
Yeah, it's definitely on the list. We're going to circle back around to Sally Rooney at one point.
Yes, we are.
But on the topic of covering authors, next episode, we're talking about Rebecca Ross.
Oh, yay!
Sam loves Rebecca Ross. And I like Rebecca Ross too, but not to the level of Sam.
I'm in love with Rebecca Ross.
So we're really excited to talk about that, kind of talking about Rebecca Ross and her books. She's most known for her series. I don't remember the series name, but the first book is called Divine Rivals. That's kind of like her big thing. So we're excited to get into that.
It's going to be an amazing episode. So come back. I'm going to talk all about Rebecca, and it's going to be
Becca
so fun.
J. Yep, it's going to be incredible. If you liked today's episode, you're in luck. We post every Monday, and if you need their fix throughout the week, you can follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, because TikTok is still around. I know when the last times we've been like, if it's around, yeah, it's still here. You can follow us at the Bookyard Pod and get some content there.
Have a good week.
See you guys.